from the Science of Mind magazine, The Daily Guides. Today's reading is a little bit of a variation on yesterday's. Let me back off a second. The month's readings appear to be about abundance in different ways. Abundance 101, 102, 103, and then so on. And yesterday we had abundance in relationships. Well, today we have abundance in committed relationships. So what's the difference? Well, let's go find out. I've got to mention at the outset that, hang on, I need to get my screen back. Still haven't solved the mouse thing. Oh, I'm going to read it and then we can comment on it. First quote is from Johann Wolfgang Goethe, who was famous German philosopher of 200 or 300 years ago. I'm sure you've heard of him. If not, look him up. Johann Wolfgang Goethe, Goethe. If you just Google Goethe, you'll come across him. What did he say? He says, love is an ideal thing. Marriage is a real thing. A confusion of the real and the ideal never goes unpunished. So in other words, if you automatically assume that love is in every marriage right from the beginning, then you're probably going to pay for it, because the two things are not necessarily the same. He's saying you get married, that's a commitment. It's a relationship, yes, but you've made a commitment to somebody. But when you truly love somebody, yeah, you've made a commitment, but it's on a different level. It's a different thing. So one is kind of a everyday transaction, and the other one is something at a deep soul level. And Ernest Holmes in The Science of Mind, on page 82, that's the textbook, he says, Spirit is the Father, Mother, God, because it is the principle of unity back of all things. The masculine and the feminine principles both come from the One, capitalized. Spirit is all life, truth, love, being, cause, and effect. It is the only power in the universe that knows itself. And this is what our friend Reverend Jim's got to say about committed relationships. Committed relationships between people who make the mutual decision to share a life or a segment of that life often arise from romantic relationships. True. Which may or may not be committed relationships. I'll come back to this. Romance is driven by the limbic system of the brain and the non-rational aspects of our personalities. Commitment usually begins after infatuation diminishes and the need arises to engage with greater intention. The realness of commitment is in its intentionality and the willingness to do the work necessitated by intention. Abundance in committed relationships means having the grit to see yourself and your partner or partners with radical honesty. A deeply committed relationship is not dependent on external cultural rules for its maintenance. It is instead built on a loving intentionality for the mutual benefit of you and your partner. There's a mutual sharing of selves and a mutual support of one another as individuals. When I perform a wedding ceremony, he says, I use the phrase, quote, as long as we both shall love, unquote, instead of until death do us part, in the vows, because commitment must be practiced to be meaningful. Staying together when the love is gone, simply because we took vows, is the very antithesis or exact opposite of loving commitment. So he's talking specifically about the difference between a marital commitment and love in that relationship. Well, when Barbara and I got married, after a year, So we're still newlyweds, right? We went on something called Marriage Encounter. And the whole purpose behind Marriage Encounter was to help us. Excuse me, I'm not sure why I'm yawning. To help us as a married couple have a better relationship. But they made this one proviso. They said, if your marriage is in trouble and it's not good, please don't come to this. It was a weekend course, actually, a weekend event, because you get involved in it, because it'll probably make it worse. So what did it involve? It actually involved sharing about different things in our lives. And there were couples there who presented and were vulnerable about their own stuff. Like one guy said, I really get upset when my wife just picks up a tube of toothpaste and just squeezes it anywhere, whereas he likes to squeeze it from the bottom and keep it neat all the way. It might seem trivial, but it can get annoying. So there were those things, but bigger things. And how they did it was they had us actually write to each other. So we would be given an issue. We would have something that we had to share with each other, but sometimes it's difficult to have open verbal sharing. So we would write it down. And then we would write down our feelings and our thoughts about it. And then we would exchange notepads. And the other person would read what you'd written down. And believe it or not, it made it easier. But what the whole thing did was, because we continued having meetings with the same group afterwards, but not quite so often, it really actually helped us to establish a good grounding to our marriage, which is what it's talking about here. And it helped us to get beyond the fact that, one prime driver, obviously, not in all couples, but in most couples when they get married, is sex. I mean, it's natural, it's human, and it's good, because the human race wouldn't carry on if it didn't. So it's good, but it's not the be all and end all. So this is intended to take you from that infatuation or just focusing on sex stage to beyond it and becoming friends. So I think we've been married for 44 years, and the basis is that we became friends fairly early on, and we stayed friends. But what this reading today also did for me was, so I start seeing different ideas about love, and then I go down the rabbit hole of going Googling, because I know that Greek has got lots of different words for love. So I went and Googled it. Now, some places I went on the web said there were 9 forms, others said there were 7, some said there were 6. What I actually liked was the one on Wikipedia, because instead of looking at saying, oh, there's all these different words and defining them, what it did, it started looking at the concepts as to what they mean. So agape love is really unconditional love. And then eros is sexual love, for instance. Philos or philia is affectionate love, and that can apply to different groups of people, and so on and so forth. There were 6 of them here. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that we need to differentiate between what we mean by love. And the word agape has come into English usage. Also eros has come in, which is sexual love. That's come in, and just a regular word for love. So I think what I got from this is a reminder that we look beyond the surface, and we actually look at how we can develop meaningful relationships. And it also applies outside of marriage. I mean, to any kind of relationship, if it's going to be based for any length of period, it's got to be open. It's got to be vulnerable. Do we all have secrets? Of course we do, but by and large, it's based on being open with each other and being honest, especially about our feelings, and being rational about it. So if something that your spouse does, or your partner, your friend does, it's good to get it off your chest and say, look, what you're doing, to me, I find it annoying, but that's no reflection on you. It's just the fact that for whatever reason, I find it annoying. And maybe it's my job to deal with it, or maybe it's our joint job to try and deal with it. And if it's something minor, well, it doesn't matter. But if it's something major, then we need to deal with it. And sometimes we have to go to see counselors to get it sorted out. When he talks here about in the marriage ceremony, he says, until love, what does he say? As long as we both shall love, instead of until death do us part. I don't use either of those. I let the couple decide how they want to make their commitment. So it isn't automatic in what I do. And I got most of my stuff from Reverend Jesse. It's not automatic to put in there. We don't normally put in until death us do part. So that was just an aside. He gave us one long rambling affirmation and then one shorter one. And honestly, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with what he's written. In a committed relationship, I bring radical self-honesty, humility, clarity, and compassion to bear myself and my significant other. I think that's a good thing to contemplate. And is contemplation the same as an affirmation? I don't know. But I would say it's a good thing to contemplate, but not to use an affirmation. Affirmation to me is something that you repeat to yourself to convince your subconscious mind of something. I live my commitments and expect commitments in return. It's kind of a way of life, and that is more like an affirmation. I may be unique, but I think when affirmations get this long, they're not going to be remembered probably, and B, they're probably not going to be used a lot. But when they're short and to the point, I live my commitments and expect commitments in return. I think that's pretty simple, and it's something that most people would look forward to or use. Those are my thoughts going into the weekend. As I said, I went down the rabbit hole and started research, and I probably spent about 15 or 20 minutes looking at different kinds of love, and then coming up with this Wikipedia one, which I liked because it was based on a concept, on ancient Greek concepts. And then I went down another rabbit hole of making sure that they'd actually got the right Greek translation of this thing. There are all these different things, because one of them, they didn't. The word that they had used in Greek was nothing like the word that was in English, and that was from one website. So there we are. Reverend Lisa will be on tomorrow about 9 a.m., 9:30 a.m. I'll be back tomorrow evening at 5 p.m.-ish. I don't see anything getting in the way right now, but life is life. You never know. So finally, please take care of yourselves. Remember, self-care is incredibly important. You have to build the foundation before you can look after other people. It may seem selfish, but you have to do that, because if you don't, then when the storms come along, it will be washed away. But when it's built on that strong foundation, when the house is built on the rock, that rock is not going to go anywhere. It's sound, it's solid. So yes, self-care is incredibly important. Look after other people, absolutely. But you must look after yourself first so that you're strong enough to help others. And with that, I'm going to say namaste.